The Major League Baseball pennant races are upon us. There's 2 weeks left in the season. For teams like the Braves and the Mets, every single remaining game is essentially a playoff game, a brutal fight for the division. I'm going to be talking about pretty much all the teams to some extent in this video, and we've got to start with the Yankees because at the All-Star break, the Yankees were the most slurped team in Major League Baseball. You had their idiotic, ostentatious fans constantly talking on Twitter, oh, we're going to set the win record this year. What was the win record for the 0-1 Mariners? Oh, are you kidding me? We'll beat that by 10 games. We can't lose. There's no brakes on this train. We're finally going to win another pennant after being dethroned and embarrassed by the Texas Rangers in 2010. No, didn't happen. And they're not going to win a pennant this year either, let me tell you why. Because they don't have the pitching and they have too many slugging style players. For the last 10 years, the New York Yankees have been a threat and they always bomb out of the playoffs. They can't even make a World Series. And why is that? It's because you take an entire team full of high strikeout guys, sluggers who have no plate discipline, and you put them against S-class postseason pitching where guys are known for having extremely high strikeout rates and managers are going to use their best bullpen arms aggressively. You remember that season a few years ago where the Yankees bought big at the deadline, and did they get a big bullpen arm or a second, a second starter as far as slotting into that number 2 hole? No. They got Edwin Encarnacion, a hard-washed Edwin Encarnacion. So you have a roster full of guys that slug and don't hit for average. What do you do? Let's add more sluggers. It's just completely idiotic, and you see this plan constantly in the Yankees, and they've moved away from that a bit this year. Obviously, DJ LeMahieu's won a batting title, but if we sort by batting average here, it's only Aaron Judge, their hard carry, and a monster who should win the MVP that's hitting above 300. Judge has been absolutely insane this year, and even though Ohtani pitches, Judge deserves to win the MVP, and he's really heated up in September. But this was a team that got such an insane amount of credit at the All-Star break and has really fallen off hard, and there's a couple reasons for that. They arrogantly traded Jordan Montgomery, like their third best pitcher, sort of a middle of the rotation guy, and they didn't really get much back for him. A little bit of outfield help, but they only really needed outfield help because of the Joey Gallo folly, which Gallo hit 220 in Texas with pop and defense, and they offered him a 5-year, $20 million AAV deal, $100 million total, obviously, and he fucking turned it down because he thought, oh, I'm going to go to New York with that short porch and rake, then I'm going to enter free agency, and some dumbass team's going to give me a mega deal. He absolutely was atrocious in New York. Couldn't cut it in New York. Couldn't cut it with the big spotlight, despite the fact that the stadium is made for left-handed pull sluggers like Joey Gallo. Traded to the Dodgers, just as abysmal after. Hopefully the Rangers sign him for $4 million a year. 5 years, 4 per. It's about what he deserves. Gallo just can't cut it on the big stage and got completely laughed the fuck out of New York. And that's why the Yanks wanted to move Montgomery for another outfielder. Softon hitting 209. He's sort of cute lineup protection for Judge. You put him behind Judge and the pitcher thinks, Jesus Christ, both these guys can hit the ball 500 feet. But Softon's been terrible in the second half. He got banged up a few months ago and really hasn't looked the same since. Worst batting average on the team. Aaron Hicks looks hard washed. This is a guy that a few years ago looked really good and looked like he was going to be very scary for a long time. Couldn't stay healthy. He's stayed healthy this year and he's been pretty shit. He hasn't played good defense. Josh Donaldson doing about what you expected from him. He's another guy that's washed, was great in 2015. He hasn't been that great this season. At least he plays true third base and has some pop. He strikes out too much. If you're the Yankees, last season the Yankees were really struggling with their defense, especially in the middle of the infield. They were doing this cute thing where they had, Gleyber Torres is going to play short. They didn't really have a true shortstop. They tried to address this with Isaiah Connor-Falefa, getting him from the Rangers. But we can see here if we sort by OPS plus, which if you don't know, 100's always average and higher is always better. and it's adjusted for ballpark and era. Judge has an absolutely unfathomable 213 OPS plus, which essentially means he's better double than average. I mean, he's just been god tier, an absolute hard carry player. They didn't pay him, and he went off and had a career year. Hopefully, he signs somewhere else, like in Texas. That'd be cute, but I doubt it. I think he'll get extended long term. Plays great defense too. Just a hell of a player that deserves the MVP. Rizzo's been good. One thing you have to notice here with Rizzo is his on base is over 100 points higher than his batting average. So a lot of times with on base and batting average, if a guy has a low average but he walks a ton, his on base will be 100 points higher. And that's what you're sort of looking for in like a good slugger, is that 100-point disparity between batting average and on base. If you're a guy like Rugi Odor or Adolis Garcia that never walks, your batting average might only be 30 points lower than your on base, which is bad, obviously. On base percentage, one of the most important stats that you look at as a baseball fan, and we can see here Judge is the only one with over a 360 on base. This is a team with a lot of holes. This is a team that was never going to set win records. A pennant winner is not born after a few hot months. Matt Carpenter, did Yankee fans honestly think that that guy who couldn't cut it in the Rangers minor league system was going to keep hitting home runs at that pace? I mean, give me a break. This is a deeply flawed team. And if you look at the pitching, Cole's been good. Jamison Talon is really nothing. Do you even want to start him in the playoffs? Nasty Nestor Cortez has been great, and him moving from the bullpen to the rotation successfully is one of the best things to happen to the Yanks in the last few years. They really needed him. He's looked great as a starter. They arrogantly put him on the IL thinking, oh, we have this insurmountable lead, and we're just going to put guys on the IL who aren't even hurt to rest them. And that was a big part of their ridiculous struggles down the stretch. Jordan Montgomery was a good pitcher, a solid pitcher that they fucking traded. Luis Severino's always hurt, literally always hurt. And if we sort by ERA plus, we can see some chump diggities that are up here, but Michael King was a guy who was exceptional and top tier out of the bullpen, tore up his arm, is not going to be available for the playoffs. So then they rely on this guy, Clay Holmes, to pretty much be the hard carry of the bullpen. Again, looked unhittable at the beginning of the year. He's looked human a little bit since then. Still very good, but Aroldis Chapman is washed. You can see here with an 86 ERA plus, and even with ERA plus, higher is better. 4.55 traditional ERA. This is a team that doesn't have the pitching to make a World Series run. It's going to be tremendously fun to see Yankee fans losing their minds after declaring this to be a win record type year. Now, if we hop back to the divisions here, yeah, they're going to win their division, but that's because Tampa and Toronto have both had sort of off years. For as much hype as they had, and for as good as Tampa has been in the past, you really expected the Rays, if they were going to be a threat again this year, instead of having 82 wins at this point, to be closer to 90. 88 with the Yanks, 87. But if you look at the Rays here, Alex Manoah has come up huge. He was mic'd up in the All-Star game. This is an aggressive, brash shit talker who's fun to watch and pounds the zone and has great stuff. I love to see these like brazen pitchers really leave it all out there and yell at guys and challenge guys to boot. Love Alex Manoah. He's been a huge part of their team. Vlad Guerrero Jr. is doing his thing. Look at this stupid bullshit. And I've signed up for this shit before, and now it's fucking in my way. Just insufferable. Oh yeah, privacy policy. How about you fuck off? Am I not signed in? Retarded. Anyway. So their catcher, Alejandro Kirk's been great. And Bo Bichette's been very good. This is a guy that gets on base a lot, scores a lot of runs. If we sort by runs here, Bo Bichette's at the top. Someone's got to get on base to be driven in, obviously. Those guys at the 1 and 2 spot have to get on consistently for your sluggers in the 3, 4, and 5 spot to have someone to drive in. If we look at the Texas Rangers, this has really plagued them all season, because what they have is a top-heavy offense where they've started Simeon and Seager at the 1 and the 2 spot nearly all season. And it's like, okay, well, they're never going to be able to get RBIs or drive runs in and be like the carry of the offense, be the engine of the offense that you signed them to be if you're batting them first and second. Now, sure, Nate Lowe has been exceptional and is contending for a batting title. Leody Taveras overperformed expectations. Adolis Garcia has been a solid option with pop. So fun to watch Adolis Garcia. Really showing the pride of Cuba in his game, and it's such a great thing that those Cuban players can come over and play in Major League Baseball now. Love that. But you had Nate Lowe have a career year, and you sort of got what you expected from these other guys. I know Jonah Heim's numbers look bad, but for the first 3 months, he was great. He's been sort of overworked and has run out of gas. But the reason I bring the Rangers up now is because it's to show that if you have your two best players in the 1 and 2 spot, well, who's going to drive in the runs? And this is not a problem that the Blue Jays have. That with Springer, with Chapman, with Bichette, with Vlad Jr., these are all between good and exceptional hitters. You even are getting a ton of production out of the catcher who's played a bunch of games. One of the most important factors of a pennant contending team is you have the established guys put up the numbers you expect them to, but then you get production out of places where you don't necessarily anticipate production, like from young players and from the catcher. So to have your catcher here sitting with the second highest OPS plus, the Blue Jays have a very good consistent offense. But the pitching is where I sort of look and scratch my chin and say, I really miss Robbie Ray because Jordan Romano, very good closer, love him, hard slider. Alex Manoah, spoke about him, he's great. But then you're sort of looking like, okay, Kevin Gausman, he's been pretty good, but Gausman's always been a guy who's like a 2 or 3 type starter, 2 or 3 slot as opposed to a number 1 ace. So you don't really believe in him that much. Jose Barrios has been deeply disappointing, pitching to a fucking 5 ERA. Garbage. They were really relying on him heavily. And Ross Stripling was a guy who used to be on the Dodgers and has been very solid this season. But how many innings are you expecting a guy like Ross Stripling to eat? He's never really been a guy who goes out and gets you a ton of innings. If we look at his innings pitched here, look at this. His max is 122. So he's not going to be able to carry your team. So that's why the Blue Jays haven't been as good as people thought, is because of their pitching, a common theme throughout this video. But then we peek at the Rays, one of the best coached teams in the league. I sort of thought the Rays would go downhill a bit, and I was right. And if you look at their WAR leaders, Shane McClanahan, who's contending for a Cy Young, he's fucking filthy. Jeffrey Springs, who used to be on the Rangers, and they traded him for fucking nothing. Got rid of him for nothing. Disgusting. He throws 100 miles an hour with an unhittable changeup. It was funny, when he was on the Rangers, he was below replacement level. When I talk about good coaching with the Blue Jays and Astros specifically, they're so good at finding these talents as far as pitchers go who look sort of average, and then teaching them about spin rate, showing them with these extremely expensive cameras and software they have, if you grip the ball like this and change your delivery a little bit, you're going to go from like 2,000 RPMs to 3,000, and you're going to become really fucking good. And also, like, this third and fourth pitch that isn't worth a shit, like, just stop throwing it, LOL. And this great pitch, it's going to put a lot of stress on your arm, but has an insane whiff rate, throw that 60% of the time. You don't have to be a majority fastball pitcher. So the Rays, using a sort of new school approach, have really gotten the most out of talent that, let's be honest, with their payroll, they don't get a lot of big-name guys. So Jeffrey Spring's been great. Randy Arozarena, explosive and fun to watch. And it's like the typical Rays lineup where a lot of these names you're not even that familiar with. They don't have a lot of boppers. They have a lot of offensive players that just get it done. If you look at the on-base percentages compared to the Yankees, remember the Yankees had one guy that had a respectable on-base percentage. And for the Rays, they're not world beaters, but it's a more consistent offense. And this is how the Rays always work. They have a consistent offense full of guys that reach base, they play good defense, and they have a lot of really good pitching that you've never fucking heard of. Even if you're a hardcore baseball fan, the Rays turned guys like Pete Fairbanks and Jeffrey Springs, the drippings of the Rangers, into elite arms. It's crazy. But Randy Arozarena is a guy that I really like. He has speed, he has pop, he's so exciting to watch. And when he won that award, the Rookie of the Year, he gave a shout out to Adolis Garcia, his countryman, who plays stylistically similar to Arozarena. This is a pitching first team, though. Jason Adams been lights out as the closer. I mean, if I asked everyone watching this video, who was the Rays closer this year, would you have said Jason Adams? Probably not. And this is like typical Rays. Like, they have a lot of arms that are very crisp and hard to hit that you haven't heard of. And they can never really retain anyone in free agency, which is a big reason why they're not as good this year as they were last year. The Baltimore Orioles, this was absolutely insane to see this team make a run. This was a team that hadn't won 70 games in like 4 years, and they're ahead of the Red Sox in the standings. So how the hell did they do it? Good young pitching. They have an exceptional catcher who is one of the most highly anticipated and exciting young prospects in the entire league. He's good on defense. He's 131 OPS plus, really good player. Rugi Odor has been fucking terrible. He's sort of a holdover of like their tanking era, like the last 5 seasons, not including this one. A lot of what the Orioles did was say like, yeah, we'll take on that shit contract if we can get some picks, or we can sort of like pretend to win and just have a few guys like Rugi Odor holding up salary cap, and then eventually once we get these picks they'll come off the books. But honestly, a lot of guys that you probably haven't heard of here on the O's: Mateo 30 steals, Mullen 31 steals, and if we click on base here, this is a gritty team, and a team that is better than the Red Sox. Trey Mancini's still good, but this is the real reason why they've improved. If we go to pitching, they have multiple live young arms in the bullpen, and they've gotten good performances from the starters, because some things that jump out to me are their abilities to, like Austin Voth, 146 ERA plus, Dean Kramer, 120. Like, these guys have been above average, over 100 innings, a little over 100 innings. And this is a team that isn't really going to be a threat next year and isn't really a playoff threat, but they've tremendously overperformed expectations, and Brandon Hyde deserves a lot of credit. So then if we look at Boston, what this comes down to is Alex Cora being dim-witted, but mainly Chris Sale getting hurt. This is a team that is very top-heavy, and if you look at it, they need Chris Sale and Nick Pivetta to combine for 200 innings and to be very good. Well, what have they gotten? Nick Pivetta's been banged up all season, and even though he has 30 starts, a lot of those he was pitching while he was hurt, and he was ineffective. Michael Wacha's been very good. Big Dick Rich Hill is ancient at 42, but he's trying to cut it out there, despite his old age. And Nick Pivetta, this guy's good. He has the big hook, but really who I was thinking about was not Pivetta, but Nathan Eovaldi. He's the guy that they really needed to get over at 200 innings along with Sale and be the carry. Pivetta's sort of that third starter. They need him to get 200 innings too, but when I was thinking of the two aces, I meant to say Eovaldi and Sale. And Chris Sale got that mega deal, got paid, and hard carried them to the World Series they won. But it's sort of funny whenever you look back and consider, it's like, we had to sign Sale to that deal to win that World Series, and Sale can't stay healthy. He's been fucking terrible in terms of his production for how much he's getting paid, because he just can't stay on the mound. And it's really sad, because he's a top-tier strikeout pitcher that's absolutely incredible, and a huge reason why they are successful whenever they do win. But this is one of those deals where if you look at innings pitched here, and you look at like, oh yeah, he got paid real big, and then he hasn't really done shit since then. No innings, 42 innings, and fucking 5 innings, that's nothing. And the Red Sox are dumping so much money into Chris Sale that if he gives them 0, it's very hard for them to get the innings pitched that they need. So Nick Pivetta, yeah, he's made 30 starts, and it was Evaldi who was battling with injuries, but you have Pivetta and Michael Walker both really out there gutting it, but you don't have that top end that you need. And I think the Sox bullpen is pretty shit, honestly. Matt Barnes is an absolute butcher. I don't trust him at all. Garrett Whitlock's pretty good, sort of inconsistent. Same with Hirakuza. And Jake Diekman, below average when he was great. Yeah, it turns out those great numbers you had in 2020 meant fucking nothing, Jake. You look at this. You can take this fucking 1,000 ERA plus and ram it up your box. But anyway, the Red Sox are a joke. If we look at their offense here, Devers has been great. Bogarts has been great. Best left side of the infield in Major League Baseball. Martinez is starting to fall off a little bit, but he still gets his. Other than that, Story's been average. Verdugo's been average. This is a team that can put up runs, though. The offense is not the fucking problem with this team. The problem with this team is their two best pitchers couldn't stay healthy, and their bullpen sucks. It's just really embarrassing for them to be below the O's in the standings, though, and they don't have that much time to catch up. Not that it matters, but it's sort of a pride thing. All right, so moving on to the AL Central. It was funny when for months Minnesota led this division and people pretended like they were going to be a playoff threat just because they led the division in May. It's funny, like people can be so reactionary in baseball. Like earlier I was talking about the Yankees and like how their fans were acting. Man, like you would think these people just started watching baseball. Like, oh, we're 60 and fucking 30. Who cares? You've got to do it all season. And for this team, the Twins, they had the Carlos Correa signing. He was supposed to be the hard carry for their team. Injuries have always been his problem. He's been great. He's sort of lived up to his potential this season. Byron Buxton, who they paid, really good player, shit batting average, strikes out too much, can never stay healthy. Great when he plays, especially defensively. Luis Arias competing for a batting title. Okay. Other than that, look at this. Okay, I understand some of them have OPS plus of over 100, but look, the fact of the matter is they don't pass the eye test. Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez are the Yankees' drippings. These were basically two guys who couldn't play a lick of defense and were a fucking embarrassment. And getting rid of those guys is a big reason why the Yanks have improved a lot defensively this season. And the Yanks, who I don't think are going to win a pennant this season, are scarier this season because of their defense and because they're not just trotting out an entire lineup full of fucking sluggers who can't play defense. But you want to know why the Twins were never a threat to win the division and you were an idiot if you thought they were? Look at this. Just look at it. Look at their fucking pitchers. They don't have, okay, they have a couple guys in the bullpen who you and I both know you've never heard of that are having decent years. Other than that, Sonny Gray, look at that. 117 innings. That's not going to get it done. He's above average. That's about it. You have hard-washed Chris Archer, Dylan Bundy, who is never good. I mean, there is no pitching on this fucking team. None. And who's going to, like, you think Carlos Correa is just going to solo carry you there when Buxton's always hurt? No. This was never going to be a playoff team. Now, let's look at the preseason favorites, the Chicago White Sox, who are making absolute fools of themselves until they basically put Tony La Russa on the IL to just get him the fuck off the team because he was falling asleep at the wheel, literally, and had no fucking clue what he was doing and looks like a hard-washed boomer. As far as the team goes, though, Dylan Cease has been god tier. Him and Lance Lynn have really carried the team. Johnny Cueto's been good too. Michael Kopech is very good, but sort of injury prone. And if we look at OPS plus, Tim Anderson's been hurt for a large portion of the season. He's been above average. Jose Abreu slugs and is solid. Andrew Vaughn, Luis Robert, same thing. But looking at the rest of this team, Yoan Moncada had a terrible start and really still hasn't found his form. Yasmani's Grandal has been hurt and bad. They've had a gaping hole in the middle infield pretty much the whole year. They signed fucking completely washed Elvis Andrus, who hasn't been the same since he got hit in the elbow. AJ Pollock just isn't very good. And then if we look at the pitching here, the pitching's actually not that bad. You have established playoff veteran Johnny Cueto. Hopefully Michael Kopech will be healthy for the playoffs. And obviously Dylan Cease has been exceptional. Kendall Graveman and Liam Hendricks are stellar out of that pen. And I like this team, but it's one of these teams that it didn't really pass the eye test all year. And Lance Lynn started off slow, but he's been solid. And you got guys like Joe Kelly and Dallas Keuchel who are big names that just don't look like they did in their prime at all. And you will look in vain here for Garrett Crochet's name. Yeah, hurt again. One of my favorite players. It's just a real shame. But the White Sox are funny because they were like a lock to win the AL Central. But they have been terrible all year and are struggling and are sort of on the outside looking in because the Cleveland Indians, aka the Cleveland Guardians, fucking trashy clip art, have looked good. Now, what's the difference between the Indians and the Twins? You see that? That was Emmanuel Clase was this exceptionally talented, hard-throwing righty that throws an unhittable cutter that the Rangers had, and they traded him for one fucking inning of Corey Kluber. So they have one of the best closers in the league. They have two top-end arms that help them get there, and then this is what can make them a legitimate division winner. Shane Bieber. They have a hard carry ace that puts up a lot of innings. You have to have an ace, okay? If you're the Minnesota Twins and you don't have a single ace, it's like a best of three wild card and you don't have a guy that people are scared of for game one, you're never going to win a World Series. You have to have an ace to win a World Series. And we can see Tristan McKenzie has been great out of the second starter slot and has eaten innings, and Cal Quantrill's eaten innings too. This is another thing. Baseball isn't just about like, oh, your starters being good, because you're never going to have like 5 elite starters, but you have to have your 3 through 5 starters be able to eat innings and be above average. For most of the month of September, while John Gray was hurt, the Rangers were starting a scrub every game except for when Martin Perez pitched. So you would start the game and it would be like, Kohei Ohara is going to pitch. Okay, he's going to get destroyed and pitch less than 3 innings. And then you're exhausting your bullpen. Your high leverage bullpen guys get used in the earlier innings, and it's just really hard to find a win condition. Next game the next day, you're starting another bum, a guy who's too young to be in MLB and might not ever be good enough to be in MLB, a guy like Spencer Howard or Cole Ragans. He's out by the 3rd inning. Again, you have to dip into the bullpen. You do that day after day after day, all of a sudden all your bullpen guys are exhausted, worn out, and ineffective, and you're constantly playing from behind, and it feels like you can never fucking win. And even when you get up big, like the Rangers did against the A's in a game I attended a few days ago, you've taxed the bullpen to the extent where it's just very hard to close out leads. So the Guardians just have way better pitching than the Twins do, and that's the crux of the issue. Also, they have Jose Ramirez, who's a beast. We can see here him with a 152 OPS plus. Already has over 100 RBIs. He's probably going to get to 30 dingers before the season's over. And if we look at these OPS plus numbers, Andres Jimenez has been great. Oscar Gonzalez has been very good too. These are guys that probably not familiar with, but the Indians, the Guardians, whatever, they have sort of a scary team like this in terms of low-key guys that you haven't really necessarily heard of as much, carrying the offense, but really it comes down to pitching. Just touch on the Royals and the Tigers real quick. So everyone knew the Royals were going to be fucking terrible. They have no pitching at all. I'll show you. They have Scott Barlow, their closer's been decent, and then other than that, it's a fucking zoo. Zach Greinke, even though he's 38 and pretty much has none of his stuff left. He's still literally average. But other than that, with these really shitter teams, you have to sort by innings pitched and then just look at the damage. So Brady Singer's been pretty good, but like look at that. Brad Keller, terrible. Chris Bubik, terrible. Daniel Lynch, terrible. So it's a lot like the Rangers in September where like 1 out of 4 games, they're almost just punting. It's like, how the hell are we going to get to our bullpen? Remember that 2015 Royals team that was sick, that won the World Series, and the build order for that team was like, oh, we're going to get 6 innings. We only need 6 innings out of out of big game James Shields. And then we have all these big guys we can go to. Greg Holland, Luke Holchaver, Wade Davis, and it was almost like they had like 5 elite bullpen arms and they only needed 6 innings out of the Royals starters. Well, this is like the opposite. This is where you're sitting there with your dick in your hand going like every single game, like the second inning comes and you're like about to have to fucking pick up the bullpen phone. But if we look at their offense here, they had Benintendi, who they traded for Chicklets. Salvi Perez got banged up a bit, but he's great. Bobby Witt, top prospect in baseball, has been average. Whatever. I mean, Whit Merrifield looks washed. This is just a shit team. The Detroit Tigers, this was sort of funny because this was like just a disgusting clout chasing trend following disaster from the jump, where you had a shit organization that really didn't have the pieces to compete, and there were a few exciting young pieces but nowhere near enough to compete. And you had the GM sort of ostentatiously saying, all right, we're going to go all in and spend big this offseason because my job's on the line, not because it was the right time to buy or anything like that, you know. So this was one of those situations where GM is feeling a little bit rich and he goes out and blows an insane amount of money just on whoever the fuck is out there. And I remember reading like comments on this, the Detroit Tigers subreddit, and they were like, this was during the off season, and they were like so happy and hyped. Oh, we're spending big this off season. We're gonna be good. These young guys are gonna come up. We're gonna compete for the shit tier division. And one guy commented, I'll take one Javi Baez, please. Javi Baez has been a fucking fraud. This guy swings at everything. No plate discipline. He has the style of game that is going to age fucking horribly. He's a flashy defender more than he is a good defender. This was a guy that just got slurped insanely hard by that 2016 magical Cubs slurp machine, the media monster that would not stop giving him credit. And this guy coasted off his rep for years. This is one of the most overrated players in baseball, and you gave him a monster deal. This guy swings at everything. He strikes out more than once a game. He's in a lineup full of shitters. They have one guy above 100 OPS plus, and it's the guy they thought was going to be the backup catcher. I mean, if you look at this, Javi Baez below average. This is what I was talking about earlier, where 241 average, not any good. And okay, well, what's his on base? Oh, it's 283. 40-point difference. That's shit. Remember, we're looking for like a 100-point difference. Miggy Cabrera, hard washed, one of those deals you give out to a guy, 10-year deal to a guy who's 30. Yeah, great. And then you're gargling the tail end of that deal, just waiting for it to come off the books. But Miguel Cabrera was great in his prime. This team's a fucking atrocity, and I don't want to spend any more time talking about it. I'll take one Javi Baez, please. And that Rodriguez starter that used to be on Boston that had one good playoff start, and we're all going to fucking pretend that he's good. Yeah, the GM was a moron. I'm glad he got shit canned. Okay, so the Astros, and look, they're already at fucking 96 wins, which is insane. If you remember at the All-Star break, the Yankee fans, we're locked in, first place for sure. And it's just like, the Astros overtook you like it was nothing. So what makes the Astros good? Yordan Alvarez, a top tier slugger, decimates the Rangers, extremely potent, has looked just as good despite the fact he blew his knee out a couple years ago. Yeah, he's a DH. He doesn't play in the field, but this guy rakes. He's going to hit over 300 for years and years. Notice that over 100-point disparity between batting average and on base. He has over 1,000 OPS. He's fucking ridiculously good, Yordan Alvarez. This is a guy who is on a path to be on the Hall of Fame. Look, I get that he's 25. He's going to have lineup protection for years, and I don't see him falling off anytime soon, even a little bit. This is a terrifying slugger. Jose Altuve's multi-time batting champion, very good player, good defender, 32 years old, still looks in prime form. Always going to be good in the 1, 2, or 3 slot in the order. Alex Bregman, talented slugger, 140 OPS plus. I remember getting this. Uh, Never mind. Kyle Tucker, very good, 131 OPS plus. This is a guy who the Astros were sort of making room for and hyping up for years. He's been great. And Maldonado's never going to hit, and Jeremy Pena replacing Carlos Correa has looked decent. So this is a team that can lose one of the best fucking players in the league in Carlos Correa as far as pop from a middle infielder goes. They'll be fine. So it's just crazy how deep they are and how good their farm system is, because whenever the Astros lost Garrett Cole and Zach Greinke, people were sort of looking around like, well, maybe their window's going to start closing up a little bit, because obviously pitching's the name of the game. But not only do they continue to have a great bullpen and consistently augment the bullpen with young arms, Framber Valdez and if we go to innings pitched, and Jose Urquidy, I forgot his name, they're both exceptional. They're both innings eaters. These were two young guys that were hyped up, and it was sort of this question of how good are they going to be, but it turns out that they're going to be very good, and they eat a ton of innings. And for the Astros, you see 5 pitchers with over 130 innings, and that goes a long way in keeping your bullpen fresh and helping you reach your win conditions for the games that you play day in and day out. Remember, baseball is a huge grind. It's insane, and as far as like longevity goes, it's very important. And this is sort of the dichotomy of the AL West, where you have teams like the Astros with 5 legitimate guys. I mean, 5 guys that you're going to be able to count on every single day and are going to just spam quality starts, and a team like the Rangers and Angels where they're looking around like, how in the fuck are we going to get to the 6th inning? But man, oh man, the Astros just do it year in and year out and are so good. Odorizzi, LOL. And Hector Neris has actually been good, and on the Phillies he was a mess, but and the Astros are just so good. They're getting to the point where it's just monotonous to see how good they are. So to talk about the AL West a bit more, Seattle looks good. I think they're going to make the playoffs for the first time since 2001. And Julio Rodriguez, an exceptionally exciting player, one of the best young players in baseball. Same with Ty France. That's one thing about this team is they bought big in the offseason, Robbie Ray, Jesse Winker, cats like this, but you really need that young core to augment the free agent signings, and they finally have it. Eugenio Suarez is a guy that just strikes out a disgusting amount but has a lot of pop. He destroyed the Rangers this year. His OPS plus really does say it all. Adam Frazier was a guy who was decent in Pittsburgh and has looked like shit since. Probably just got hot at the right time, but he was gotten by the Padres and Seattle picked him up thinking he would be great. Robbie Ray has eaten innings, but he's been average. This was a guy who, when you clicked on his baseball reference back in the day, he had the best K. He had the best K per 9 in MLB history. Like, it was in gold. It's obviously not like that anymore, but Robbie Ray not as. And I sort of expected like Robbie Ray to not be as good as his contract. It really wasn't that hard of a prediction to make. But the pitching here worries me for the Mariners. This is just not a, remember, like pitching really matters in the playoffs. So when the playoffs come, sure, you're going to be scared of Robbie Ray, and that's like a legitimate ace, even though his numbers don't really show it. But like, going to be scared of mid-tier Logan Gilbert. What about Marco Gonzalez, who's never been scary throughout his whole career? Chris Flexen? Nope. Sure. George Kirby? Fuck no. So when you look at this team, who are you sitting here worried about? Hard wash Diego Castillo? No. Paul Sewell? He's been good, but none of these pitchers really move the needle for me. So if the Seattle Mariners make the playoffs, which they almost certainly will, they're going to bomb out in the first round, and it won't even matter. And then we can talk about the Rangers and the Angels, and then I think I'm going to make the NL a second part of the video. The firing of Joe Madden was hilarious. It was just like a panic move. Ohtani's been god tier. That's the only bright spot of their team. Trout is starting to get hurt all the time. It looks like he's going to be one of these guys that as he gets older in his career, you're going to see a lot of seasons on the baseball reference page where he plays less than 120 games. And if we look at these last few years, remember 2020 joke year, but last season in 2021, he was healthy and the team, like the last month of the season, he could have played and just didn't because the team was such a fucking joke. But hilariously here, he's sort of like coasting off of his rep. I mean, look, the numbers are still there, let's be real, but in terms of actually making the playoffs and doing damage in the playoffs, yeah, great. I mean, no one puts up empty stats like Mike Trout. And obviously, the reason that this team is bad is the pitching because Trout and Ohtani are good. Taylor Ward was reaching base a lot. Jared Walsh hurt. Brandon Marsh, I'm pretty sure they traded him to the Phillies. Yeah. This is a team that gave up. This is a team that had glaring holes from the jump. People expected this team to like slug a lot and shoot out with teams, and like there's always some idiot writer that predicts them to win the division. Every single year it happens, no matter how little pitching they have. It's very funny, but we can see here this team ranked 13th in the AL in runs. Yeah, they have Ohtani. Yeah, they have Trout. Rendon hurt again. Huge waste signing, waste of money. Typical like clout chasing Angels contract where they like give an aging slugger a monster deal. This team's a joke. Hopefully they trade Trout and Ohtani so they can find success somewhere else. As far as the pitchers go, yep, you guessed it. Shohei Ohtani is their best pitcher. Welcome to the Anaheim Angels, where the best pitcher is also your best hitter. They also have a shit bullpen, and Noah Syndergaard was above average and didn't get hurt, and immediately was traded. It's like for years Noah Syndergaard has been hurt or been inconsistent or been disappointing, and then it's like, yeah, the moment he spends a couple months not getting hurt for once, and oh, he gets insta-traded to a contender. It's just so funny. Anytime the Angels do try to sign a pitcher, it seems like it doesn't work, and they signed Thor and they insta-traded him. Not that that was the wrong move, it's just like classic Angels. Next year, the Angels are also not going to have pitching, and they're also going to be shit, and people are still going to do like the talk about how great Ohtani is, and it's still just going to be disappointing because you know you're never going to see him in the playoffs. Same with Trout. All right, so then we can talk about the Rangers, my team. This is a team that is sort of in like a bridge year. They signed Seager and Simeon, who were disappointing for the first 2 months of the season, but have been pretty good since. Nate Lowe's had a career year and is contending for a batting title. Seager strikes out way too fucking much. He is pretty much always swinging for the fences. Makes a shitload of errors. A disgusting amount of errors, frankly. And Adolis Garcia, explosive and fun to watch. One of my favorites. Marcus Simeon started off super slow, and I actually like him as a steal threat. Him and Adolis, 20 homer, 20 steal guys. Good for them. Cole Calhoun, disgusting, doesn't deserve to be in MLB. Killed the Rangers for years as an Angel. Now he's killing them from the inside. Mark Mathias, this is the guy they traded Matt fucking Bush for. He's actually been great. Josh Young, the top hitting prospect, drafted 10th overall out of Texas Tech, has looked very good. And Mitch Garver, of course, got hurt, lol. Solak is a positionless embarrassment. They got ripped off again. Bubba Thompson's fast, but he's not ready yet. Same with Tavares. If Tavares and Thompson can turn into very fast players with great stealing ability that can get on base at an above average level and play good defense, they'll be assets. I'm just worried they're never going to be able to hit. Sam Huff's been garbage. He'll probably never develop. Charlie Culbertson, Brad Miller, embarrassments, don't deserve to be in Major League Baseball. Eli White, a versatile speed flea that was actually better than his OPS Plus shows, but got low bridged by Charlie Culbertson. Glad they got rid of Willie Calhoun. The pitching, Martin Perez has been great and has had a career year. Dane Dunning throws sinkers down the middle and then acts surprised when he gets hit, and he has no run support and a bad defense behind him. Really disappointing year for Dunning, even though he's been sort of average. Glenn Otto and Jordan Howard have both proven that they're not ready for Major League Baseball yet. Too young. Hopefully they'll get there. John Gray was great when healthy. Brock Burke was exceptional. Matt Moore was exceptional. Dennis Santana was great for 2 months and horrid for the rest of the season. And whenever you look at the Rangers, it might be weird to consider that, like, Matt Moore, Jonathan Hernandez, Matt Bush, Jose Leclerc, these were guys that you could go to with a lot of confidence. Brock Burke, a 2.54 ERA plus in 75 innings. He was so good. So the Rangers had a lot of good bullpen arms to go to. Joe Barlow looked great for a month, but he's been shit since. So the reason that their terrible skipper, Chris Woodward, got fired was because he had all these great bullpen arms to manage and fucked them up at every turn. Chris Woodward would put mop-up men into one-inning games, and there's a reason the Rangers are something like 7-35 in one-run games this season. You might be thinking, well, it's because the bullpen and pitching shit. Well, it's not as bad as you might think if you actually dive in and look at the numbers. Really, it's the starters that did them in. And John Gray couldn't stay healthy but was great. Perez was phenomenal, but other than that, man, it's a fucking wasteland. Cole Ragans, not ready. Howard, not ready. Otto, not ready. If the Rangers sign two big, established, talented free agent pitchers, sort of like what Carlos Rodon was last season, that's the ticket to winning 86 games. The Rangers could be a legitimate threat next season, but the crux of the issue is signing the pitching, and they really need another outfielder too, because if you go into the season with like Bubba Thompson and Leody Taveras both being the starters, I just don't think that's going to work. I think you need an established slugger like a Judge. So the Rangers about what expected. I think I predicted them to win 74 games in my preseason article, but Simeon and Seager look like shit for a long time, but they have a nice little bullpen. And for the first time in years, the Rangers are not going to be starting next season with what looks like a whole new roster. They're going to keep Heim. They're going to keep Lowe. Obviously, Simeon and Seager are staying. Josh Young should be the opening day starter at third. Mitch Garver will be back before he gets hurt after 2 weeks again. I expect guys like Ezekiel Duran and Josh Smith to be on the roster at some point. And obviously Garcia will come back. So to me, this really screams stepping stone year. But it's funny to consider, like, if John Gray isn't great when he's healthy, and Martin Perez is Martin Perez of every other year of his career, then this could easily be a 100-loss season with Chris Woodward, like, mailing in the platitudes, as we can see. This is the best Perez has ever been by far, and it's not even close. Top prospect in 2011, finally found his top prospect form, using his cutter and changeup a lot, but pretty shit year for the Rangers, honestly. The Oakland A's, they sold everyone on their team that was worth the motherfuck and essentially gave up. They are running it down mid, they are looking for a new stadium, and are essentially a fucking atrocity. I mean, there's not much here to say about the A's. They don't give a fuck. They don't expect their fans to come to games. They know they're going to be a joke. So as far as the AL goes, who do I think is going to make the playoffs? The Yanks win the East, Cleveland wins the Central, Houston wins the West, obviously. And then I think Toronto and Tampa make it in. And then I think Seattle is the other team. I think Seattle barely makes it in and gets stomped. But that was a little bit of AL baseball talk. I'm going to do an NL video soon.